Before we begin, I ask that you subscribe and see what other character concepts I've magicked up already, and stick around until the end to see the characters in the running for the next one. This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash Bros. Yet and theorycraft a full fighter design as if they got in for real. Our challenger this time is from a series that has really turned the page recently. Mario was stuck in the doldrums for a while with only a few exceptions, but the Switch era kickstarted a turnaround that has led the series, and many of its characters, back to being fresh and interesting again, including someone who's had an uptick in attention lately, someone who flew mostly under the radar before, but is prominent enough to have a shot at getting that coveted invite, and his ability to magically mess with his foes could make him a fighter unlike any we've seen yet. Kamek. Kamek is a recurring antagonist in the Mario series, a powerful dark wizard who acts as Bowser's caretaker and right-hand man. Anytime his liege cooks up another harebrained scheme to conquer something or win Peach's affection by force, Kamek is, usually, right there with unflinching, though sometimes begrudging, loyalty, particularly in the RPG spin-offs, where the increase in dialogue draws out his superiority complex and his disdain for goody two-shoes like Mario and Luigi. But Kamek's role started much earlier, back when the bros were just babies and Bowser was a royal brat. Acting as the power behind the throne, Kamek's attempt to kidnap Mario and Luigi led to him becoming an enemy of the entire Yoshi clan. This happens to be where he became a character at all. While Super Mario World introduced Magic Koopas as an enemy, this is where Kamek gained a distinct identity as the best and brightest of the shelled sorcerers. The difference between character and enemy type is muddier in Japan, but he's become a distinct individual nonetheless. Basically, Kamek has been a recurring figure for almost 30 years now, even if he prefers to plot behind the scenes instead of being out in the spotlight. In the platformers, especially the 2D ones, he's never far away when a Mario game needs a second antagonist to enforce Bowser's will, and he has a lot of magic available for doing that. He can cast simple projectiles, conjure obstacles and hazards, summon enemies and power them up, and a lot of other stuff he keeps hidden up his robed sleeves. He's even been accruing major roles lately. Kamek is the acting host of the new Mario Party game, served as the post-game super boss of Yoshi's Crafted World, netted a key role in the Mario movie, supporting Bowser just like in the games, and he finally got to be playable in Mario Kart after narrowly missing out of 64. This is a character with the wind at his back, so it's no surprise that some people have been talking about him in the context of Smash. Kamek has been a stage hazard already, but these new appearances, his moveset potential, and the chance to add someone who could count as a second Yoshi character all have eyes pointed his way. Not that it'll be easy for him, with how many others there are vying for a spot on a starting roster that'll likely only have one or two new Marioverse characters. But Kamek still has enough going for him to be worth keeping an eye on. Wouldn't be as shocking as the one they picked last time. So let's show what this character could do. How could Kamek work in Smash? Kamek's default appearance is easy to nail down. Blue robe, wizard hat, magic wand, the works. He's had a constant look with only mild adjustments from the get-go. On the simple side, but classic and instantly recognizable, even if it's hard to tell him apart from other Magic Koopas. Good thing we can use animations to let his personality stand out. As both a seasoned magic user and an outright villainous one, Kamek should come off as calculating and threatening when things are going his way, casting complicated spells, like vanishing during his dodge animations, with intelligence and sinister confidence, like he's hardly breaking a sweat. But when things don't go according to plan, his patience and cool-headedness both run thin. He'd have some over-the-top animations and voice clips for getting hit hard or knocked out, especially if he suffers a star KO. Your goal when playing as him? Make sure he isn't subjected to that stuff. Kamek's alternate costumes are surprisingly simple. Beyond the default, his second, third, and fourth colors all pull from the red, green, and yellow robes various Magic Koopas have had in different spin-offs. His fifth alt is that, plus a little extra, borrowing the white Magic Koopa design, but adding more to it with new red trim for the obligatory White Mage reference. Next is a deeper cut, a pseudo-retro palette based on the Super Mario Bros. Style Magic Koopa sprites in the Super Mario Maker games. Rounding out the set is a purplish palette inspired by counterpart Kamek Koopa from the early Paper Mario games, and a dark green and orange set inspired by Bowser himself, commissioned as another show of loyalty to the Koopa King. Let's get more into detail. Playstyle first. As a villainous wizard with a knack for evil plans, Kamek should emphasize gaining and maintaining control. No surprise that the magic user is a zoner, right? Kamek wants to create zones of control that force his opponents to play around them, covering as many potential actions they might take as he can. He's what you might call a mixed zoner, able to do so using both projectiles and defensive hitboxes that extend beyond his actual body. This also includes some further reaching tools for exerting stage control, hence the lockdown part. He'll have the means to limit where foes can freely move around and force them to follow his pace, ideally. Playing as him should feel like being on his side of a boss fight, adjusting your strategies based on what the other players are doing so they can't figure out a pattern to your attacks and get a chance to kick you halfway back to Bowser's castle. And looking at Kamek's stats, you can see why he doesn't want to get hit. His weight value isn't terrible, but it's still on the cusp of the lightweight tier. Magic users are traditionally pretty fragile, but Mario Kart 8 Deluxe actually made him a middleweight in that game. I decided to balance the two sides, so weight is a weak point but not a huge one. Especially when he has actual huge weak points here. Most of those mobility stats are, not good. Having the 10th slowest walk speed and 7th slowest running speed put a damper on Kamek's ability to get around, preferring when opponents have to come to him. He's also very floaty, just outside of the 10 slowest fall speeds. Makes him harder to combo, but also makes it much harder to get back down after being hit up high. These stats aren't all bad. Kamek's initial dash is pretty solid, and his airspeed is just outside the top 1/3 fastest. This makes him much more comfortable in the air, as long as his attacks are putting the work in. Which they can, mostly. Kamek's moves have middling raw damage, but he boasts a surprisingly competent, albeit convoluted, combo game and some very good knockout moves. But just like most of his mobility, most of his attacks are also quite slow. He wants to play at a distance where that can't be used against him so easily. How well that works will depend on how skilled his player is. Now, what form does Kamek's moveset take? We'll start with the basics, the simple stuff. His jab combo is a frantic swing of his wand back and forth for 2 total hits. While most attacks with the weapon have magic trailing it, Kamek's jab doesn't. He's using it for emergency protection. In other words, don't expect this to do much damage and don't rely on it. Kamek's forward tilt is more prepared, reaching out slightly and swinging his wand at an upward angle. This move has pink-colored magic trailing it, as do his other tilts. Looks cool and does solid damage, but it's not the fastest. Up tilt has Kamek wave his wand overhead in a circle, a bit like Villager's up tilt with more range and worse speed. Might look like he's casting a spell, but he's actually repurposing the motion for direct combat, so it's animated more forcefully. Kamek's down tilt has him swing his wand across the ground at ankle height. Not the most original animation, I know. If it hits though, it has a chance to make the opponent trip and fall, the first of many ways he can mess with them. Now for the fun part. Kamek's dash attack has him quickly hop forward, materialize his broom beneath him, and boost ahead a set distance. Goes surprisingly far despite its longer than usual startup, but since he couldn't prepare his broom properly, it sputters out quickly and he tumbles off, leaving him wide open. Now for the more complex magic Kamek saves for his smash attacks. His forward smash has him summon a fiery explosion right in front of him. Inspired by the spell used in Super Mario RPG's Wiz-A-Koopa fight, this multi-hit powerhouse is great at taking stocks, and very punishable if it whiffs. For his up smash, Kamek suddenly summons 2 copies of himself to his left and right. The now trio immediately aim their wands at a point directly above the real Kamek, dealing 1 hit in the process. Then they release a combined magical burst for a second, stronger hit. Pretty unwieldy, but it scoops people up from a wide area into the explosion. The copies are just visual effects that don't interact with anything else. Rounding out the set is a down smash where Kamek summons his broom again, this time quickly spinning while pivoting in front of and then behind his original position. His fastest smash attack by far, but being on a flying broom gives it a low blind spot that makes it fail to hit anyone hanging from a ledge. Kamek takes to the air next, with even more spells to use there, including more elements. Inspired by the yellow Magic Koopas in Paper Mario and their ability to electrify allies, Kamek infuses himself with lightning for a multi-hit attack that covers his body. One of his only decently fast moves, but also the only one that has no real disjoint. Forward air is interesting. Kamek swings his wand in an upward arc, which generates 3 magic projectiles that travel a short distance in a fan shape. While technically 2 hits, the main event is the second part, a very effective zoning tool outside of Kamek's specials. It's also pretty slow and hard to use if you don't have space, and reflectors can turn it against you. Best to hit with the wand first in those matchups. Kamek's magic has a distinct look with its 3 geometric shapes, and his spells can take those forms more directly. For his back air, he creates a magic triangle shape that spins behind him for 3 hits, covers his back really well as a non-projectile zoning move, and leaves the rest of him vulnerable during its long animation. For his up air, Kamek looks above and forms magic that rapidly expands into a circle shape for 1 hit, then pops for a second, covers a sizable area above him, and the second hit is a rock-solid kill move. It's also another lengthy animation. Noticing a trend? Finishing the set is another tricky one. Kamek's down air forms magic into a square shape below him, then turns it to stone and lets it drop. A rare projectile down air, it does moderate damage and can go a surprisingly long way, which gives him an edge guarding tool most fighters don't have. Kamek's grab game starts with something interesting. For his actual grab, he waves his wand and creates sparkling magic that slowly extends forward to try and catch someone. It functions like a tether grab, letting him pull people in from a distance. Can't actually grab ledges or attack with it in midair though. And for his pummel, he zaps his captive with a bit of magic while they're held in place. Kamek's throws have even more magic. His forward throw is another electrical move, grasping his opponent with his free hand while electrifying himself to shock them for multiple hits that eventually forces them away. Next, Kamek's back throw summons his broom behind his foe, then guides it to drag them forward until they're behind him and flings them away. Believe it or not, this one's a kill throw, and a pretty solid one at that. Up throw has Kamek form a bit of magic below his foe that launches upward, carrying them up with 1 hit, leading into a small explosion for a second hit. This one's his highest damaging throw, at a respectable 12%. And anyone who played Smash Run remember how the Magikoopa enemies in that could debuff your stats? Well, Kamek's down throw is a point-blank magic shot that deals little damage, but inflicts a temporary debuff that makes the target's attacks weaker. Only lasts about 10 seconds at most though, so it's just some temporary insurance. Last but not least, Kamek has a few taunts for riling up his opponents. His up taunt has him quickly summon his broom to sit on, do his signature laugh, then poof the broom back away. His side taunt has him spin his wand in a circle, summoning 3 shapes that themselves spin around. Show off. And his down taunt summons his broom again, and directs it like a music conductor to sweep the ground in front of him. Kind of like, you know. But this sorcerer's been saving his best, so let's see what Kamek's specials are. Beginning with a neutral special? That's practically 3 in 1. The already mentioned geometric shapes give us a way to include even more magic. On use, Kamek raises his wand up as 3 shapes rotate around it at a moderately fast pace. A light blue circle, red triangle, and green square. These correspond to 3 different spells he can cast based on whichever shape is directly above his wand at the time, and pressing B a second time casts it. The blue circle corresponds to Seeker magic, a brilliant blue projectile with moderate power and speed, and slight homing ability that makes it slowly curve toward nearby opponents who are close enough. The red triangle forms into fireball magic, which comes out at a 30-degree downward angle, deals more damage if it hits, and if it contacts the ground or a platform, turns into a solid fireball that rolls further. And the green square is for morph magic, the fastest yet weakest of the 3, and only capable of going in a straight line. But if it collides with a physical projectile, it transforms the object into a flip-flop that falls to the ground harmlessly. And if it hits an opponent who is holding an item, that item is also transformed while in their hands, giving them a flimsy sandal that deals hardly any damage and can only be thrown weakly, even with a smash input. Tricolor magic is 3 spells in 1, letting Kamek adapt his zoning to suit the matchup or situation. Seeker magic works against foes who stay airborne, Fireball is better for grounded opponents and ledge trapping, and Morph is his answer to item play. When rotating between spells, you can shield or jump to cancel out, saving whichever one you're currently on and letting you use it right away next time. How else can Kamek mesmerize his enemies? His side special finally uses his broom's full power. No longer just for backup, now he can really let it fly. Press forward and B, and Kamek summons his broom, hops on, and actually charges it with magic this time. Then he rockets forward at high speed, blowing right through anyone in the way. But this baby's more than just a generic burst option. For one, you can press up or down to adjust your height during your flight, to recover more easily or catch anyone who thought they were out of harm's way. For two, Kamek also scatters magic beneath him while in motion, just like he often does at the start of his platformer boss fights. While this magic doesn't make his monsters grow, nor directly affect the environment, it does deal damage over time, but no knockback to anyone or anything directly beneath him. Zoom Broom is a burst of movement with a couple extra tricks that make it helpful even if your aim isn't perfect. It also gives you something to recover high with, since Kamek does not go into freefall afterward. Still falls very slowly like usual though. You also can't pass through enemy shields while on the move, so if someone just blocks your flight, you'll be a sitting duck afterward. Kamek's up special is next, and if you're familiar with this guy, you saw this one coming a mile away after flying on his broom got used early. Another thing all Magic Koopas are famous for is teleporting away like cowards the moment you get close. This move has Kamek do exactly that. He spins in place, surrounds himself with magic, then disappears. The magic quickly travels a set distance in whichever direction you press, and Kamek rematerializes once it stops. It's sort of like a slightly slower Mewtwo teleport, including the lack of damaging hitbox. You want to avoid enemy attacks with this one, not try to barge through them. But it does have an extra trick. If you hold B at the start to let the magic build up before you vanish, you can raise the teleport's maximum distance, and give it a little more end lag, but hey, fair trade. Warlock Warp is a warping recovery, as the name implies, with an extra quirk that helps make up for its weaker base stats. If winning straight up isn't working too well, why not mix up your timing and go further instead? You can also use it to bail out of an unsafe situation if you spot an opening, just like Kamek does in his boss fights. Good for you, annoying for your opponents. But all of this is child's play compared to what we have up next. Kamek's down special might seem unassuming, but there is so much you can do with it. Another recurring thing with Magic Koopas, their ability to interact with various blocks and obstacles. Some are even able to create them on command. On use, Kamek conjures a large block, with color matching his player slot, that sits on the ground or floats in place, depending on where he currently is. While it sounds like a simple obstruction at first, it's not perfect at that since it can only take so much damage, and if anyone touches it or stands on it for long enough, it flips around in place and becomes intangible for a couple seconds, doing so immediately if someone jumps into it from below. But this thing has all sorts of ways it can interact with the rest of Kamek's moveset. If an opponent is hit into it with any decent amount of knockback, it blows up with an extra hit that deals minor diagonal knockback in the direction they came from with additional stun, which makes it easy to combo into other moves or even knockouts. If you aim Kamek's up special close enough to the block, he teleports on top of it, able to attack from his new perch immediately, and quickly, or it'll collapse on him. And if you target the block with magic, it can transform. Touch it with a regular attack, and it'll turn into a yellow Koopa shell that falls and slides forward. But target it with the morph magic from Kamek's neutral special, and it turns into an iron ball instead, rolling more slowly, but hitting much harder and hammering enemy shields. Magic Block is a bundle of options wrapped up in one move. Place it wisely to hamper movement, temporarily, create a trap, and have a backup projectile all in one. You can only place one block at a time. If you need it somewhere else, you'll have to destroy or polymorph the current one. You also can't place a block lower than stage height, nor too far away from the stage. No fair obstructing opponents' recoveries or stalling. Only one thing left. What's a good boss fight without an ultimate attack at the end? Kamek's Final Smash combines two things his debut game made him famous for. With his magic strengthened by the Smash Ball, Kamek floats in place and laughs confidently. Waving his wand, he casts the magic usually reserved for powering up his underlings onto himself, turning giant-sized in an instant. Summoning a now equally giant broom, he flies away off-screen. But a moment later, he reappears in the background, flying quickly from right to left as he prepares to attack. You can move up or down to adjust his position while he's back there, and slightly more once he's off-screen to the left as an extra trick. And just a moment after he disappears off-screen again, Kamek lets out a screech as he blasts through the field of play at Mach speed at his chosen height, dealing a wickedly strong hit to anyone in his way. Quickly returning to normal size, Kamek floats back on stage, adjusts his glasses, and gets back to work. This is how Kamek could fight in Smash, a malevolent master of magic whose long service to the Koopa Kingdom and its ruler has given him a wicked edge and an ego to match. But it's an ego he can back up, with a wide array of magic for outwitting and outmaneuvering anyone who interferes with his plans, as long as they don't turn the tables against him, that is. Kamek wields a complex set of zoning tools for controlling space and staying a step ahead of his enemies. This includes various traps and setups, which give him ways to create big combos and take stocks with ease. And he has a surprisingly competent disadvantage state, with great recovery and multiple mix-ups for outsmarting foes and getting back to even ground. However, Kamek needs time and space to prep his zoning and setups, often needing to gain the upper hand without them first. His mostly slow frame data leaves him vulnerable up close and easily punished when his attacks miss. And he tends to fall apart quickly when he's the one getting outsmarted, not unlike when players win his boss fights. Won't lie, this one took a while to fully come together. Between everything Kamek himself has available and every other type of Magic Koopa, there was so much to work with that I had to narrow it down. Wanted to balance having a variety of interesting ideas while still keeping the moveset cohesive. Hope I pulled that off. There are a few things I wish I could have tapped more into, like Kamek's ability to duplicate himself. Having it only show up in one smash attack feels underutilized, but I didn't have anywhere else to use it, and I already knew I wanted a block for his down special, so yeah. I think this character shows how many interesting newcomer options Nintendo still has. Hardly anyone was talking about Kamek in Smash for years, and now people are actually looking into what he can do. Even got a full fan-made mod a while back that I haven't checked out yet. Wanted to finish this video first so I wouldn't unconsciously steal anything, so any similarities are a coincidence. There are a lot of under-the-radar characters with niche fan bases who are hoping their favorites get a chance, so hopefully Smash 6 has room for at least a few of them. Special thanks to these people here for contributing to this video, and to my patrons for the continued support. And now, they can make some magic happen. Anyone currently backing me on Patreon for as little as $1 per month can vote on which of these 5 characters gets featured next. Something tells me the new edition's going to get some attention. So, until next time, try not to party too hard, alright?